Hello, thank you for tuning into my channel. It's time to cut up the shirts for the Christmas memory quilt. So if you want to learn how I plan and go about that process, please stay tuned. This is video number 3 in the Christmas memory quilt series. I'm using some shirts that somebody gave to me to make a quilt for a family member, and I've already started the process. I've kind of prepped everything, and I've made 3 or 4 blocks for the quilt. These are what I'm considering the special blocks, and now it's time to get ready to make the rest of the quilt. I got this particular idea from one of my subscribers who sent me pictures of a couple of t-shirt quilts or a couple of shirt quilts that she was working on, where I typically use an entire panel of a shirt to make the block. She actually cut up the shirts into smaller units to make blocks that way. So I took that idea and figured that I would use that plan to create this quilt for my client. Now, when it came to choosing a block for the basic blocks, I went to my beginner sampler quilt where I chose some ideas from that block a day book to create a sampler quilt. I'm going to link, actually I'm going to link the playlist for my t-shirt quilt video or my playlist that shows how I made a t-shirt quilt this past July, because that's how I would typically make a shirt quilt with the panels, and you can see that process. But for this quilt, I'm doing something a little different. I'm also going to link the playlist for the beginner sampler quilt so you can see each one of the blocks and how they were put together for this quilt top that I have here. I had 2 blocks in mind, both from this first quilt. The first block that I had in mind was the Fields of Green block, which is this one here, and it is 16 squares that have been sewn together, and you can see that there's kind of a pattern, so there are diagonal matches to each one of the rows. But there was another block that kept coming back to me and coming back, and so I decided that I'm going to go with this block. It's called the Woven Cross. So let me see if I can, okay, here it is here. So this is the block that I'm going to be using for this quilt. And so today we're going to go over the process for cutting everything out and getting the pieces ready to go into the quilt. All right, so I have the block here. There's a picture of it here. Actually, let me use the actual quilt block here so that you can see it. Okay, there are 16 shirts that were given to me for the purpose of making this quilt, and so I've used some of those shirts to create these special blocks here. The quilt is going to be 30 blocks total. It's going to be a 5x6 quilt, so I'm looking at making 26 more blocks. I'm going to pin this quilt top up here so you can see it. So hopefully you can see the block well enough that I can explain it to you. Okay. So, and I did, in my sewing journal, I drew this block out so that I could get a better idea of what it needs. But here, hopefully you can see it a little bit better. So basically what this block consists of is rectangle and square combinations. So there are 4 rectangle square combinations here. And then there are 4 matching corner blocks or corner squares. Okay, so as I was getting ready for this part of the quilt, the first thing that I thought of was these corner squares, because they all need to match. And in my 16 in the 16 shirts that I got, there were 4 red or 4 maroon and 2 black. So I decided to make these corner squares um, maroon for some of the blocks, and black for some of the blocks. Because, well, one reason is because of this shirt, the Texas A&M. And so I knew that this person is a Texas A&M fan, and there were a lot of this color shirt, a lot of burgundy shirts. So I decided to do the cornerstones for each one of these blocks in maroon and black. Since I'm going to need 26 blocks, each one of the blocks has 4 squares, or 4 of the corner squares, which meant that I needed 104 of those corner squares. Now what I've done is I divided that in half, because half of them will be maroon and half of them will be black, which will give a nice secondary pattern once the blocks are together. Now I've already gone ahead and cut out all of the squares here. I'm going to put a little snippet of a video. There is a UFO video, I'll link it in the comments, where you can see me cutting out these squares. But basically what I did was I took those maroon shirts, and there's like a couple of red in there too, but I used all of these. I have bagged the shirts with our Pelon SK135 interfacing, and then I just use my rotary cutter to cut out the squares. So I have 52 of the maroon/red squares, 52 of the black squares. And so these are going to go in the cornerstones of each of the blocks. Now for the next section, we're going to look at these rectangles. I'm going to do, it's the same process. I had to figure out how many rectangle and square combinations I needed. And since there are 4 of these, then the numbers are easy because I already have them. So I need 104 rectangle square combinations. So what I mean is this rectangle and this square match. And you can see that for each one of these blocks. There's a rectangle and a square that match. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the rest of those shirts and I'm making those rectangle square combinations. Let me show you what I've already done here so that you can see where I am so far. I decided first to go with the shirts that I've already used to make the special blocks. So I can pull this down now. So you can see that I've used this orange shirt. This black one I'm not going to use again unless I absolutely have to, because it's a special block. This maroon shirt, I'm not going to use it unless I absolutely have to. I've pulled this shirt, and then I don't remember if this was 1 shirt or 2 shirts that I used to make these blocks, the tan blocks. I want to say it was just 1 shirt, but again, I don't remember. So I have this shirt that I used and this shirt that I used. So there are 4 shirts that I've already done the cutting for. Actually 5. I'm going to explain that in just a minute. And for each one of the shirts, there is a rectangle and a square combination. So I just cut them down as much as I could to get the rectangles and squares, and you can see them here. All right, and I do have a little bit of explaining to do for these. This particular shirt, I haven't cut it yet because there was a giant, it's a really huge piece left over, and so I'm not sure how I'm going to cut it yet. Well, I know how I'm going to do it now, but at the time I hadn't thought about it. So these are the ones that I've done so far. Okay. Now, the reason I said I have a little bit of explaining to do, this orange shirt and this little, I don't know, olive green, these are from the same shirt. This was the outside of the shirt and it had a little lining in it, so I used that as well to create one of the rectangle square combinations. Now, I said I wasn't going to use the red or the burgundy in any of the blocks, but I found one of the shirts had this pattern on it. It had a stripe. So I decided to use this stripe as a part of one of the blocks. And the only thing that I have to make sure to do is for any block that has this this combination, it's going to have black squares. So I'll work on that later. Now there's one more shirt that I want to look at, and I'm not going to do it on camera because you've seen the process in the UFO video, and so I'm not going to go through the whole process. But I want to talk a little bit about design elements before I cut a shirt up on camera. So I'm going to grab that shirt and then we'll talk about it. Here is a shirt that I want to just kind of go over some design ideas for you with this one. As you can see, well, let me see. This shirt for my special block that I use for this shirt, I actually just used this the red and white stripes in it, but it actually has 1, 2, 3, 4 different designs in it. So what I'm going to do with this shirt is I'm actually going to take advantage of these designs so that I get 4 different patterns out of it. I'm going to interface this off camera, but I'm going to cut it on camera for you in just a little bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a rectangle and square combo out of the stars, and then I'm going to do one out of the Mount Rushmore. I think I'll get 2 of these because the back is exactly the same as the front, and then I should get 2 of these with the stripes, and then I should get 1 with the signature, because this part is not quite big enough to get a 9.5 and a 5-inch square, or it's not big enough to get a rectangle and a square. So the rectangle is going to come from this side, and then the square is going to come from over here, which is on the back. And the same thing for the stars. I think I can only get 1 from this portion and then 1 from the back. So if you have a shirt that's like this that has a lot of different designs, take advantage of that and come up with some ways to include all of those patterns in the quilt. I'm going to go ahead and interface this off camera, and then I'll come back and show you how I cut it out. I have the 6 pieces of the shirt cut out to prepare my rectangles and squares for this memory quilt. Now, I didn't give you the measurements earlier, so I think I need to do that now. The rectangles are going to be 9.5 by 5 inches, and then the squares are going to be 5 inches to give me hopefully the size that I want for the block. And from the shirt, I actually was able to get enough cuts to get my 6 rectangle square combinations, but I had to get them a little bit differently. So I have 3 of the stripes that are going to be in the quilt, and then the 2 Mount Rushmore and 1 with the signatures. I thought that I was going to be able to get the stars out, but I wasn't able to get that out of the pieces that I cut. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my shape cut ruler for these, and with the other shirts, I don't think I'm going to cut small pieces like this at first because I'm going to need a lot more. But since I was trying to be really specific about how I cut the pieces out of this shirt, that's why I cut it down first. If you look at some of my other videos for this quilt, and I may insert a video here where you can see me actually cutting up the whole shirt into pieces, but I'm not going to do that I didn't do that for this one. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to use my shape cut ruler to get my pieces, and I actually have my 18 by 24 inch mat on top of my larger mat, so I'm going to use it as kind of a rotating mat here. And what I'm going to do first is cut the rectangle and square sizes first, then I'll turn the ruler and get the 5 inches. So I'm just going to cut here at 0 on the shape cut, and then I'm cutting at 9.5, which will give me the rectangle, and then 14.5, which will add that 5-inch square. Then I'm just going to move my ruler, take away these little extra pieces, and then turn the mat here. And when I place the ruler back down, actually that's not going to work for this one because the piece is too long, but I can put one on top of the other here. Because the reason I say that is because this shape cut is only it's only 12 inches tall, so just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm just kind of lining up the bottom line of these, and then I'm going to cut at 5 inches to give me the pieces that I need. So here is, I'm cutting at the 0 line, and then I'm going to cut at the 5-inch line to give me the squares and rectangles, or the square and rectangle that I need for this. And so for some of these pieces, I'm able to get it out of that one strip, but when I'm not able to do that, I have the 2 pieces. So let me show you that here. So for like the signatures, I'm actually, one of these came from the front and one came from the back. And I'm going to do this same process, except I'll just do it one at a time because these are smaller pieces. So I will finish these off camera, and then I'll show you how much I have so far. These are the squares and rectangles that I cut out of that one shirt. So I'll kind of scroll through so you can see the different designs. Here's the stripe, and then here's the one with the signatures on it. Okay, and then the same are in the squares. Now I've already made 55 other square and rectangle combinations. So you can see these here, which means I have 43 more combinations that I need to make, and I have 4 shirts left. So I'm going to use those 4 shirts and get as many as I can out of those, and hopefully that way I'll have enough, and I have a big combination of blocks to choose from when I'm putting together my woven cross blocks. Now I was so curious about the process that I went ahead and made a block, because once I get so far in cutting, then I just want to start putting something together and see what it's going to look like. And so this is what I have. This is the first block that I've made. This one has the black cornerstones. I am going to have another, there will be 2 alternating blocks in this quilt. One will have the black cornerstones and one will have the red cornerstones. And so I'm going to put these blocks, now there are 25 more of these to make, that I'm going to put with those 4 special blocks, so that I have an entire quilt. So my next challenge is to finish getting these cut and start making blocks. Hopefully making blocks will be relatively simple, but I will document that in the next video so you can see how I get everything organized and how I put those blocks together. Again, I will link the original woven cross video in the description so you can check that out, along with the beginner sampler quilt, which has a total of 9 different blocks that use squares and rectangles that you might choose to use for a quilt that you make. If you have any questions about what you've seen in this video, please leave them in the comments below. Thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!